I gotta
Uh,
say also, my biggest disappointment in this whole thing has been watching Cornell West just spiral. You know, like bro,
that man. It's
what are you doing, man? Although I will say though, I will say like a lot of people have a lot of respect for Cornell West, and I do too. But he's always been like this. Cornell West has always been the one to like just go right up to the line of saying, "Well, violence against your oppressor is justified." He never actually does that. He kind of covers it up with this very like preacher kind of brotherly language. He always calls everybody brother. He
yeah.
basically speaks like a Southern Baptist pastor. And the problem is like everybody's been calling him out on this. You know, the Sister Soldier called him out on it. There's actually a really good debate. There's a debate between him. Oh my God, I can't remember the name of the scholar right at the top of my head. Holy shit! Like I'm picturing his. Anyway, he's gotten schooled by a number of Afrocentric scholars because he's always like, okay, as bad as things are, maybe this is the best that we can do. You know, as bad as things are, we can't talk about crossing the line into violence. And the reason for that is that America has done the exact same thing that Israel has done. I mean, Israel learned from the best. And what happens is you have people that are, whether they're secular or religious leaders, as long as they have the best interests of Black people in America in mind. If they're charismatic, they're intelligent, they can speak the truth and shame the devil. They assassinate them. They get rid of them. And what is left? We're left with the Cornel Wests. We're left with the Henry Louis Gates. We're left with people that with even the John Lewises. Sorry,
Yeah.
uh, the Andrew Youngs, the John Lewises, and I'm like the people that even though they've seen the amount of barbarity that's been levied against Black people in America, they will still say we need to find a point of unity. And it's like I don't have any interests in trying to appeal to the empathy and the emotions of people that just have none for me whatsoever. I can't appeal to the humanity of people that don't have any, you know?
For me, what makes me just not, I don't know if it's just disappointed, is seeing Black people not fall on the right side of this Palestine. It is so disheartening to me.
Well,
It's like
okay,
you
which
cannot
Black people
see
though?
the parallels here. It
Which
is
Black
so
people?
disheartening. But go. But it was.
Well,
I mean, I'm just saying we're in my area. I would call
hmm.
them liberal Black people. The liberal DNC sort of Black people that
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
fall in line whatever the DNC believes, and with no critical analysis to even just look, just without, just disconnected from anything they tell you, just for yourself, just
Mm.
read about it independent of any corporate news, and you'll just start to hear the parallels. And it's just so bizarre that some Black people, I'm not going to say all, I'm not even going to say the majority, but there is a segment of Black people that fall, just in line with this, same talking points. And it's disheartening. I must say it is
I
disheartening.
mean, on what? I mean, that's what they've been taught. That's been how they've been conditioned how to think. Like, yep. I'm sorry, but there's just like there's a whole lot of Black people that are like they're errand boys. They're farm animals. They're dogs for the Democratic Party. I've ne- I've never understood how it is that like knowing what it is that happened to Black Americans, that happened to Black people across the diaspora. That you're going to get these talking points for any. This comes from like the white led Democratic Party. You're just going to accept everything they say without giving it a second thought. You're not going to question it whatsoever. And then there's people like Hakeem Jeffries, for example, that's just
Ooh.
Hakeem Jeffries and the Richie Torreses of the world that'll say some wild shit. Like, what did Richie Torres say? It says something like, because there's 600 Jewish people die, there's like 200,000 Americans dying, and it's like, uh,
What?
that's a real spin on the three fifths compromise. All right, there, bro. It's like these people are they're lapdogs, and they talk like this because they're trying to further their careers. And ordinary Black people, when they talk like this, it also perplexes me. It's like, what are you getting out of this? Are you trying to build a media career? Are you trying to like burnish your
Yeah.
non-existent future politically? Like, what is happening here? And they I don't know why it is that they talk exactly like white Democrats. People call them, that they're buck broken and they're coons and this, that, and the third. But there's actually something like psychologically deeper. And actually, that in that book, Wretched of the Earth, that was just quoted earlier by Franz Fanon. Sorry, not Wretched of the Earth. Black Skin, White Masks. He talks exactly about why Black people do this, why Black men and Black women, and he analyzes this separately. why it is that they are black people, but what comes out of their mouths is a repetition. It's a recapitulation of the dominant and most hegemonic ideology, and that happens to be white imperialism. So I would highly recommend reading through that book. It's not a very long read, but there's like no better case study in how black skin, white masks applies than to watch black people who are Democratic supporters talk about the Israel Palestine issue. Huey P. Newton and the Black Panthers, like they were in absolute support, like neck and neck support with Palestinians. The Black Power struggle has always been aligned with the Palestinian struggle for independence. I'm really not sure exactly where we fell off on that one. So like all of Europe is pretty much guilty of committing atrocities against Jewish people. There have been pogroms in Spain, pogroms in France, pogroms in Italy, pogroms in Britain, pogroms pretty much everywhere in Eastern Europe. And yet, like their beef is never with these people. Their beef is always with people who never did anything to them. It's the same thing like where it comes to black people. You ever notice that they always talk about like black people as if we're the most anti-Semitic group of people in the entire world?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet, like what have black people ever done to you? It's like, I'm sorry, but Jewish people, and it's not to say that they were a majority of it, but like there were plenty of Jewish people involved in the slave trade, in the triangular slave trade. The
Yes.
same the
Yes.
same people that were being expelled from Spain during or after the Reconquista, the Great Pogrom from Spain sent many Jewish people to the Netherlands. They didn't go to the UK. They could go to British colonies, but they couldn't go to the UK proper. So where do they end up? They end up in the Caribbean. They end up in South America. And what did many of them do there? They established slave trading business. So the slave ships that were coming over, that were shipped over by the Dutch, well, who were they being auctioned and traded by? They're being traded by Jewish people. Why? Because they had experience. That's not to say that they were the only ones. There are plenty of Scottish people. I would say like by leagues more than Jewish people. Like they far outnumbered them. But it's like, but if we're talking about who's done what to whose people, black people I think have plenty more reasons to be upset with Jewish people, European Jews specifically, than any of them have a right to be upset at us about, because we haven't done anything to them. Anytime that they've even been under the rule of black people, and we're talking about like North Africans after the Moorish conquest of Spain, they were allowed to live freely, to worship freely. They were considered the same as anybody else, right? But for some reason, like it's always like you find a weaker group of people, a more marginalized and subjugated group of people, and you take your anger out on them. Remember, Palestine exists because of a British mandate after the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
So the British took over the territory that they called Palestine, and under the Balfour Declaration, they essentially like handed over stewardship of Palestinian lands to the people that would later become Israelis. And people point to that so often and say, well, the Balfour Declaration says this, that, and the third. I'm like, what the fuck does the Balfour Declaration have to do with anything? So let me get this straight. People that are not from the area, people that like have no ancestral ties to the area, no stake in the area aside from the resources they can extract and the labor that they can exploit, said to European Jews, this land now belongs to you. What does that mean? Like, that's like saying under the Berlin Conference, Uganda is actually a part of Germany. Fucking what? Yeah, under the Berlin Conference, Cameroon actually belongs to France. French people are indigenous to Cameroon. Fuck out of here! What are you talking about? Like this shit is so wild to me. Like
It's so
people
ridiculous.
basically people stole a land and then said, "Hey, I'm gonna give this land to somebody else. I'm gonna put it in their hands." And everyone's arguing, "Yeah, the people who stole the land gave it to somebody else. That somebody else has a right to it. And the people that lived there in the first place, that's bullshit." Yeah, Zionist media will help you. Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking to a friend last night about this. I don't know if you remember. I forget if it was during the 2001 fight or if it was during Operation Protective Edge, which was a few years ago. And Operation Protective Edge was like that was. I mean, to me, that was an act of genocide. Like the amount of carnage that Israel inflicted on Palestinians in Gaza was like it was unspeakable. That's the one where like, Israelis were like bringing benches up the hilltops and like watching with binoculars and having little picnics as like buildings were being bombed, like apartment buildings were being bombed and people were being shot by snipers. And it was Javier Bardem. You know Javier Bardem. He played Anton Chigurh from No Country from Old Men. He played that Bond
Oh
villain
yeah,
from
yeah,
Skyfall.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Him and his wife Penelope Cruz. They criticized Israel for the unmitigated violence that they were inflicting against Palestinian people. And a few days later, they had to issue an apology. Like their chain got yanked real hard. And if it's unfortunate that yeah, there is an inordinate amount of control of U.S. media that is under the Zionist mode of imperialism. That is like you can't say shit about Israel without somebody getting mad at you for it. You can't. Doesn't matter what they do. And unfortunately, that's like people want to talk about like, oh, it's anti-Semitic to talk about the amount of talk about like a secret cabal of Jews that control media. Like, no, there is no secret cabal of Jews that control media. Here's what it is: there are a lot of people with money invested in Israel, and in the success of the Israeli state. So it doesn't matter whether or not they're Jewish. What does matter is that they all believe very strongly in Zionism, and you can't fuck with their pocketbooks. So you can't say anything about these people. You can't say anything about Zionists. You can't say anything about the apartheid and genocidal goals of the Israeli state, the Israeli settler state, because it's not Jews. I know plenty of Jewish people that are not only against the violence and atrocities committed against Palestinians, but are against the existence of the state of Israel. So it's not a Jewish thing, but there are plenty of people that that are heavily invested in the success of the Israeli state. If that comes at the expense of ethnically cleansing Palestinians, well, so be it. I mean, just look at the other side. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Artsakh agreement is now causing the ethnic cleansing of over 100,000 Christians in Nagorno Karabakh. God, I forget how to pronounce this name without tripping over it. But anyway, uh, Armenians end up having to flee by the hundreds of thousands, and they're being ethnically cleansed out of their homeland by Azerbaijanis. Now, Armenians are by and large Christian. Azerbaijanis are by and large Muslim. So it has nothing to do with anybody's religion. It has nothing to do with anybody's ethnicity or culture. What it has to do is follow the money. Who has the most investments in what region? And that will tell you where the United States and Western countries land.
Because that is a great point that you're making, because when we're talking about sort of the ruling powers that be, and when they decide to really put their thumb on the scale of media, there's two instances that for me that really stick out. It's war, of course. We already know that when it comes to war, is ferocious sort of propaganda. But Q, which to me is being proven to be even higher than that when it comes to Palestine, and I'm seeing it now. Like, even with the war in Ukraine, it was unanimous unison, but it wasn't to the extent and to the veracity that we see with Palestine and Israel.
Oh yeah, they're talking about just like I mean, granted, during the Russian incursion into Ukraine, like people were even talking about they want to establish a no-fly zone, and then talking about the survivability of like an actual nuclear holocaust. Like, hey, hang on a second. So if we had a nuclear war with Russia, would it actually be the worst thing? So I will say that there calls to like ethnically cleanse Russia? No, but there were some pretty psychotic calls. Like, yeah, maybe we should risk nuclear warfare over Ukraine. That was absolutely wild to me. I saw people that were supposed to be taken seriously, like Michael McFaul, Timothy Snyder, and Applebaum. People whose books I read in college and thought these are the smart people in the room, and they're out here talking about fucking nuclear holocaust. I remember when the Nord Stream pipeline was bombed. And Applebaum thanked the United States for bombing it before anything had been confirmed, before anybody even knew who did what. They just knew this pipeline was blown up, and now there's like hydrocarbons escaping into the atmosphere, and the water will be polluted for who the hell knows how long. And the first thing she says is, "Oh, she thanks the United States for bombing it," while at the same time, like the United States is trying to, and the Ukrainian government is trying to blame it on Russia. That was the wildest part. Like, these people are absolute psychopaths.